I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes talking about the last 5 minutes of some of our most iconic animals. I was 4.5 hours into an uphill climb of a volcano in Rwanda. I couldn't catch my breath, a little bit like right now. I was nauseous and I was dizzy, and I was the weakest link of the 5 climbers ahead of me, and I was on the verge of tears. It hadn't occurred to me that I might fail, and I'm only 2 weeks into a year-long commitment. I'm ready to go home and give up. We were tracking a family of silverback gorillas, and in my excitement to do it, I hadn't even thought about how hard that might be. But it is hard. And so I said to my guide at one point, "You go on, I'll catch up." And he turned and looked at me, very unimpressed, came back down to where I was. He crouched down beside me, and he pointed to the jungle ahead. He said, "You're 100 feet away from Dian Fossey's grave right now." Yeah, Dian Fossey, who gave up her life for these same gorillas, was the kick in the pants I needed to get up and push on. It took 5.5 hours, but I made it. That's my friend and cinematographer, Eve, and it was worth it. So, you might be wondering, what is a Brit living in Los Angeles doing halfway around the world, trying to climb a volcano and looking for silverback gorillas? A few months earlier, I had been invited to a fundraiser in downtown LA. And this is where I learned that 100 elephants are slaughtered every day so that we can wear their ivory teeth as trinkets, and that giraffe are now on the critically endangered list. And I learned just how torturous that their deaths were at the hand of poachers. 3 rhino are killed like this for the mythical properties of their horn. Okay, I promise you there's no more photos like that. But this is what I learned at that fundraiser. I also learned that the illegal wildlife trade is the 4th most profitable illegal industry behind sex trafficking, drugs, and illegal arms sales. I also learned that the US is the 2nd largest buyer of illegal wildlife parts. Yeah, it's shocking. I felt helpless, and I felt hopeless. And I thought, I have to do something. If I truly cared, I would have to do something, but I'm just a filmmaker. I'm not a wildlife specialist. What could I do? So I made a really hard decision that night, and I decided I would go to Africa, and I would go to Asia, and I would learn from those on the front lines of this mostly silent war, and that I would tell this crisis that I was learning about through the female lens. One of the first women that I interviewed was Nomusa Zikali.
With our culture, we're supposed to bow as women. I'm not supposed to talk, to look to my husband like this when talking to him. I have to do this, to bow down. It's my culture. I started Gomo Primary School in 1998 alone as the teacher, but now there are 26 teachers at school. I believe that education is the key to success. Whenever we see an animal in our community, they chase it, they kill it. We just see the rhino in pictures. So it's easy for us to kill that thing. I told my community that we won't destroy these trees. This is nature. We need them, they need us. Let us protect everything. That's how we started. So now we're in eco school. As an eco school, we are spreading the word to the children. Now what they're doing community trips, taking the children to the game reserve so that they can see the beauty of these animals. Taking us to be hands-on, to see the things, to feel the pain that whenever they do something bad to the animals, it is as if they're doing it to ourselves. And as women, we need to have a voice to our men, not to kill nature, because our future generation needs these animals. You will find that our children, our daughters, will not kneel down. it will change. We invite everybody. We don't bow, just stand straight and talk to everybody. Because we're at school, we're in an institution. We are teaching them that we are equal. We are equal.
Namusa revealed to me that she was divorcing her husband. Not a shocking statistic to us in the West. She's the first Zulu woman ever to divorce her husband from a civil marriage, and it had come at great cost to her and her family. She was attacked in her home late one night. She was brutally beaten, and 2 of her children were raped in front of her. That's the price she paid for her nonconformist ways. So I interviewed women from prosecutors to game rangers to forensic scientists, and they live this danger 24/7. So when trouble erupts, there's no 911 call to make. They have to handle it themselves. And I found that they were suffering from symptoms of PTSD, feelings of isolation. I mean, basically heartbroken by what they were seeing in the field every day. Despite this, despite all that they go through, every single one of them said to me that while they hadn't started their careers out in conservation, that once they'd arrived and brought their own unique skills to it, they found that they were living their lives with purpose and on passion, or with passion and on purpose, and that nothing would deter them from their mission, not even the greatest threat or the deep emotional toll that they pay. What about the animals? Do they feel an emotional toll? Do they suffer like we do? I think they do, but I grew up on a farm in rural England where our animals were my friends and my confidants, a safe place for my teenage secrets. So I witnessed their joy, and I witnessed their happiness and their frustration and their anger and jealousy if another animal pulled my attention away. But even I didn't realize how deeply they grieved until I interviewed Dr. Lorinda Hearn.
I was a lecturer at university for about 7 years prior to my becoming involved in rhino conservation, and the reason that happened was because we had experienced a poaching on our own reserve, and bearing in mind that all of the animals we'd had there were animals that I'd grown up with. There was a very small rhino calf that had been discovered cowering next to the carcass of its mother. They suspected that it was about 3 months old and that it had been hovering around with her for about a week before they actually found it. He'd gone completely blind from the trauma, and you're trying to minimize its stress levels, but the only thing that it can smell is humans, and humans were responsible for doing the worst possible thing to its mother. I'd never actually heard a rhino wail like a human baby for its mother, and wail for hours on end. It was November, and it's the rainy season up on the Highveld, and he would be outside in the rain, and he would just be walking in circles. We would try to get him to latch onto a bottle, and he would refuse the bottle, and eventually started tube feeding, which obviously must also have traumatized him. But that's when I realized physically he's not so badly injured that he can't survive. Apart from the damage to his eyes, he was actually in fairly good health. And he would go and he would lay down outside, and he would literally just drop his head into water puddles like this, and I would go and sit and wrestle his head onto my lap out of the water, and then he would walk 5 steps away and he would do exactly the same thing, and I would lift it onto my lap and say, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die. Until eventually someone said to me, do you realize the reason he's not dying is because you keep asking him to? And so that night I was with him in his pen, and I would stroke his ears and breathe into his ears. He seemed to quite like that, and I said to him, if you want to go and be with your mommy, then I'll understand. Thank you for staying. Thank you for staying with me for so long. And then he died.
It's easy to feel disconnected from this crisis living so far away from the wilds of Africa. But we're all more connected than you might realize. Every time you want to travel with your family safely, or you travel on business safely, know that you're affected. It's now been proven that profits from the illegal wildlife trade fund global terrorism. The poaching of these animals is done in the worst of humanity. It's greed, corruption, money, and power. Which brings me to my final story. I knew that somewhere along the way, although I was dreading it, I would have to meet and interview a poacher and try to understand their perspective. So this is Venetia, and this is who I met while trying to climb that volcano in Rwanda. She's married to a poacher, and she told me this story. Her husband had been poaching all day. He came out of the forest, and he asked for her help in the kitchen. So she was holding her sleeping child at the time. She put him down on the ground, and she went in to help him because she knew she wouldn't be gone long. When she came back, her child was gone. And in his place was a large family of silverback gorillas. She screamed hysterically because she thought they had killed and eaten her child. And the large male, he just stared at her while she was screaming hysterically. And then something magical happened. He motioned to his family, and one by one, they went back into the forest. And there, completely unharmed, still sleeping, was her child. So she thinks that that family of gorillas came upon her child and circled him to protect him. So she vowed that day, this makes me choke up, to protect their families, the way their families had protected hers. So she and her husband now live in a reformed poacher's village at the base of that volcano that tried to finish me off. I believe that each of us have a unique skill, and that if we can identify that and bring this in service to these animals, that they will have a place on our planet. I'm a filmmaker. I made a film. And I hope that film shows how powerful we are when we decide to act on that one thing that outrages us.
It's important to live a life of purpose. Every animal, every being on this planet has got the right to be here, and that we need to start putting our foot down and saying we cannot afford to lose another species.
The greatest threat to this planet is the belief that someone else will save it.
We've taken up every square inch of this planet and destroying everything that's wild and every aspect of our environment, nature, to the point where it's going to, result in our own demise.
The survival of this species is every single person's responsibility.
If I don't do it, I don't know who else gonna do it.
Luckily, with amazing women with these inquiry minds, that communication between role players and people that have a passion of saving each and every animal comes to play like ka-ching.
We need to have more women that are gonna be in charge and able to make it different. Being a woman doesn't stop you from doing anything.
Do you want to be part of the generation of killing a species, or do you want to be part of the generation of making the world a better place? You ask me if I have hope. I do have hope. There's poverty, there's corruption, and there's greed. But on the other hand, there's faith, there's hope, and there's love. I can see the clock is ticking for this iconic species. We're in the last 5 minutes. I can feel it. But in that last 5 minutes, the solution is a global solution. We need to stand together. People need to stand up and say, but I want to understand what's going on. Not just throwing money into this. Be part of that 5 last minutes of saving the species for eternity. You can be part of it.
Will you all take a moment right now and ask yourself this question? What's my unique skill? You got it? Now, how could you use that in service of these animals, these beautiful creatures, in the last 5 minutes? Thank you.